You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Okay, in this particular segment, we're going to try to deal with the election of Donald Trump as president and try to deal with the dismay, the disillusionment, the fear, and all the protests that have been taking place. So let's appreciate something about the election itself, and let's understand something with regards to his administration and what is going on in the nation today. Let's start with Native peoples in the state. One of the things that we need to appreciate with regards to the issues that are raised in this administration has to deal with the environment. And we need to understand that in this particular class, we have recognized that the racism of the United States can lead to its logical conclusion, which is genocide. And Native peoples have faced the genocidal impulses of the state. So when we take a look at Native peoples recognize immediately the racism that's embedded in the state and the prejudices that everyone has ultimately in our nation developed over Native peoples. So when taking a look at this administration, Native peoples are not surprised at how this administration is finally just coming out with its own racist impulses and how Americans have been fooled into following this particular administration. Native peoples have always been in the forefront of the hate that has spewed out of this current administration. So again, I put up this particular sign, so you're against immigration. Splendid, when do you leave? That's a classic sign. And I juxtapose it against white supremacy. So Native peoples have always been warning Americans that they need to change their ways. It seems that we need to, as a generation, listen to the Native expression. Then we come to the Mexican experience. Now, when we take a look at Mexicans in U.S. society, and we understand the debates that are occurring with regards to immigration restriction legislation, Mexicans have been at the forefront of hate throughout the 20th century and the 21st century, as you've seen in this class. Whenever there are economic labor necessities, the remedy becomes Mexican migration, which stimulates a movement of people into the United States. When those economic necessities, when those necessities are no longer important, there's oftentimes occurs an economic downturn, which results in deportation, immigration restriction legislation. And this cycle is vicious because Mexicans have been at the forefront of hate from American society. It started again in earnest in the 1930s, the cycles where they were deported and then they were brought back through the Bracero program in the 1940s, and then deportation in the 1950s, and this cycle continues to this day. So for Mexicanos understand very clearly the hate that can be expressed by this society because, again, there is this attitude, general attitude that Americans have towards Mexicans. So I started out with the Native and the state, and of course Mexicans in U.S. society. This is not something new. Mexicans have had to face this hatred throughout. So let's appreciate that. Now, capitalism. With regards to capitalism, in the last 40 years, there have been a lot of problems, especially for American workers. One of them is a syndrome, is the automation effort. One of the things about the scientific development of the productive forces is the introduction of machinery, the introduction of machines. Now it's robotics or artificial intelligence. The idea is to decrease labor, and of course to get rid of unions, because unions have been the key to creating in the United States a middle-class America. When you take a look at the best jobs in this country, they're union jobs. Just take a look at the professional sports associations. They're union jobs. Right? So it is through the unions that people have gained their middle-class ascendancy. Then there is the deindustrialization that started in the 1970s and 1980s. where the relocation of the factory system of production has now they've been relocated throughout the globe, known as the internationalization of capital with the internationalization of labor. It started with manufacturing. Since the 1970s, manufacturing has left the United States, and manufacturing was the backbone for the middle class because there were strong unions. So manufacturing has left, as you've listened to in previous presentations, and services have increased, the service sector industry. So service sector industry are low wages versus the manufacturing and skilled work. They have been relocated. And then most importantly was debt increase. The fact that the middle class existence was based on a living wage where both husband and wife are out working in unionized jobs so that they could experience a middle class lifestyle. The wages have stagnated since the 1980s and debt has increased. So the maintenance of a middle class standard is going into debt, especially since the 1990s and the turn of the century, the 21st century. So there has been a lot of debt increase, that people's are swamped with debt, especially now with colleges, students. You can understand yourself all of the debt that you are incurring just to get an education, and you're finding that once you get your degree, you can't get a decent job to pay off the debt as you have increased your understanding of the world, of the society, especially that's what education is all about. So what's occurring is that the masses want change, all right? Masses of people are involved in saying, okay, we need a government that's responsive. So of course, politicians continuously appeal to people's suffering. Every Democratic and Republican candidate since the Reagan administration, since the 1980s, is always appealing to the masses of people. Republicans and Democrats are trying to garner the support of the masses of people. Now we know that the majority of the population is white. So racism and sexism has been always part of the process that plays itself out in presidential campaigns. So let's understand and appreciate that. We should not be surprised at the invective that occurred during the election of 2016 between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So since Reagan, every candidate has vowed to correct the system. And since Ronald Reagan, the system has failed the people. There is a lot of frustration, especially from the working poor. When Barack Obama was elected, the Republican Party could not challenge the Electoral College votes as they do. They're able to manipulate the votes and the vote counting to get themselves elected, because Barack Obama was overwhelmingly elected based on a platform of change. But Obama says that he couldn't do it, and surprise, he didn't, because Obama was not about to create change. There's this one famous economic historian named Richard Wolff. He's an economist, where he began to talk about the economic dimension to the election. And in his arguments, he poses that capitalism is a structure that has problems, that creates problems for itself. There's stagnant wages. There's public services that are reduced because there's a crisis in capitalism. And capitalism always needs itself to be bailed out. And so businesses, especially banking industries, always seek government bailouts. Wall Street always seeks government bailouts. And the politicians are there to bail out the capitalists. And so this was the discontent leading to the election of 2016. Politicians have to be different. And so there was a difference. There was a difference in the politicians. One of the things was the arrival of Bernie Sanders into the Democratic Party. Now, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, he's an independent. He's a democratic socialist. So he came with a message, but he knew that if his message needed to be expanded, and the public needed to hear it, he had to go into the Democratic primary to become to at least have voice. Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee suppressed Bernie Sanders' voice and addressed with Hillary. Hillary, of course, was associated with corporate capital. So she's part of that crony capitalism. Meanwhile, Trump, Trump captured the mantle of being different. Trump was able to use racism and sexism as a part of the problem in politics. So what happened was America turned to the right. The majority of Americans decided that Trump, well, actually not the majority, but a significant element of the populace was able to manipulate the situation so as to allow the Republicans to create a majority in different states for the Electoral College votes. So now America has turned to the right. So Trump's election represents the Republicans' commitment to white racial power. It started with Nixon's Southern strategy. It gained fruition with Reaganomics and Papa Bush's Thousand Points of Light. And it permanently ensconced itself in the guise of son of a Bush's terrorism doctrine. So this commitment to white racial power is what got Trump elected. We're looking at Trump's demonstrations and those who go and support Trump of this white superiority fantasy. The people that are participating in this fantasy of Donald Trump, they are not the common poor white trash stereotypes of thugs with tattoos, though they are there because they're posing as militant buffoons for Trump. But they're middle-class professionals working in offices, in higher education, and living as your next-door neighbors. So when Barack Obama was elected, the reactionaries began recruiting heavily under what was known as the Tea Party label. No way are they going to accept a black president. Now, under Trump, they have blatantly come out coveting white power, white privilege. Meanwhile, the religious right underscores white supremacy. Evangelicals and fundamentalists give praise to God for bringing Trump to power. And what is Trump but a spokesperson for Fox News? Because Trump relies on Fox News for his foreign policy and his domestic policy. So there's a long history of racism and anti-Semitism in the United States. It has never left. Today, the alt-right is well armed with automatic rifles. This is what Republicans let loose from their closet when they gave Trump the executive suite. And so, of course, it's very interesting to see how Republicans, they can't control this idiot that they granted power to. And that's where we're at today.